Thanks all for joining in here. Hopefully you're in the right session. We are going to learn about migrating databases to AWS with ease. I'm Paurav Chudasma. I'm a senior consultant and ProServe, Professional Services Organization of AWS, which is the consulting arm. And I work in the database migration specialty group. So we work with customers on large-scale database migrations and fixing problems where there are some hurdles on migration, forming strategies, doing migration and modernizations more so, conversion of databases from commercial to open source. And I've got Mark from EDF UK.
Hello everyone, great to be here. Yeah, thanks Pat for having me. I'm looking forward to sharing our story.
Great. So the agenda for today is going to be, we'll go through EDF UK's story of what was their future IT migration and how did they do the migration from Oracle to Postgres and on Aurora. I will then talk about why to migrate and why to modernize your databases. We will go through the provisions and the services of AWS, what's available. We will go through the patterns and the mechanisms of migrations to consider. And then we will learn a little bit about the tools and the offerings which we have and the associations which we have with our partners and others. So I'll hand over to Mark.
Thank you very much. It's unusual putting the customer first, right?
Always.
That's our motto as well, just
Yeah.
about. Afternoon everyone, as you heard. My name's Mark Chewton. I work in EDF UK. We are a utilities company, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our story on how we have undertaken a number of migrations and started to modernize our whole technology landscape over a number of years, and we're still very much going through that process, but I'm going to zoom in on a particular story today. There's a lot of words up there. You'll be happy to know I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but just to pick out a few points. EDF UK, we're a utilities company, and we've got the pleasure of supplying customers both in the residential and small business market, and also a sector that we call business solutions, which I'm going to talk to you about today, which provide energy services to UK business. We're one of the largest in the country. It's quite competitive out there. I'm sure many of us in this room are getting more acutely aware of the UK utilities market conditions over the past year or so. It's an interesting time, and technology, as with any other business, is becoming an absolute either an enabler or something that stops your business moving forward. So just to bring it to life a little bit, this case study I'm going to talk to you about today focuses in on our business customers, and we're in a unique position in the UK market whereby we're able to offer many services to UK business, ranging from the bakery around your corner right up to the big supermarket chains who have tens and tens of thousands of sites. And to do that, we require a rich mix of efficiency, but also the ability to be very, very niche about what we offer an individual customer. And from an IT perspective, that then brings a challenge about how do you scale and how do you be efficient and cost sustainable while still offering that functional differentiation. And the story today will show how the AWS database services and the AWS broader ecosystem has been a big lever in us achieving that balance. So just a little bit of history. We, within EDF UK, have a general modernization IT strategy, which is centered around AWS and cloud compute. Not singularly, we know we need to be able to have a nice rich mix of capabilities, but within our supply business, within the world I work in, AWS has been at the center of our strategy for, I'd say, about the last 7 to 8 years in earnest. And we've been on a number of different modernization programs through that time. This particular one, back in 2019, which isn't that long ago, but after the world events of the last few years, it seems a completely different time ago, we laid out an IT strategy for our business solutions area, which said we're going to keep that differentiation. We're going to provide our user base internally with an experience that they could be happy with, we could be proud of giving them. We're going to be transparent about what IT is costing our business and give them choices about decisions we can take. It may not always be cheaper, but at least we're informed about what decisions we can take, what levers we have. And most importantly, we're going to set ourselves up for the next 5 to 10 years in a marketplace that is growing. And we're fortunate enough to see a growth model in our business, and our IT needed to be ready to cope with that. And we did that at a time when we had to make big choices around solution directions. So we had this kind of crossroads that was quite unique for us, where we had the ability to go and get exec sponsorship, to go and embark on a modernisation programme, whilst also giving direct business value into our customer base. And over that period from 2019 to today, and we went live, just a spoiler alert, only a couple months ago with this, we went on that journey from strategic intent, selling the story internally to our stakeholders, working with our AWS partner team, building the design, implementing it, and the actual piece of delivery took about, 12 to 18 months for us to get there. So that's the context. I'm now going to zoom in on the database side and just talk a little bit about what we had to do and what our choices were on database. So this really, really complex architecture diagram in front of you tries to just lift up a little bit about where we started from and where we are today. And I mentioned earlier about the functional differentiation that we're able to achieve with some of the application sets that we have. Unfortunately for us, they sit on quite proprietary, what you might call legacy technology stacks, and they were on premises. A story that I'm sure everybody in this room's heard and has or is dealing with. And so we committed ourselves to moving all the compute and the infrastructure services to AWS, but we had to make a choice around the database. And those choices were quite finite, if I'm honest. Ideally, I was pushing to go to a native database set of services, really get the full stack value out of the shared responsibility model, if you like, from an AWS perspective. But unfortunately, because of some of the functional features I needed to keep, we ended up going as far as we could, but also recognizing the constraints we had to work within. And so that landed us in a place where Amazon RDS was our right choice. That is, in our case, Oracle RDS, but it still allowed us to get quite a way up the curve in that shared responsibility model, which we'll come on to a bit later. The compute was a mix of EC2 and native platform services, and then we still had the proprietary application capability on top of that to retain that functional differentiation and that real quick ability within our business context to go and win customers in a niche basis. On this particular slide is the overall architecture, and it's got your kind of things you'd expect to see there with multi-availability zone deployment, load balancing, read replicas around the database services. But in terms of some of the key outcomes and key considerations our architecture had, we really needed to make sure, if we're making this change, we need to be sure about performance and scalability at all levels of the stack, not just at the data level, not just on the compute, but how the functionality responded to that. As with many businesses, we didn't have the luxury of just cutting over when we fancied. We had to have minimal downtime, minimal user disruption, and within our marketplace, there's only certain windows within a year when it's acceptable for us to make big IT step changes to our business. And we had to marry that up with the business profile of activity that was going on. And for us, and maybe in other sectors, this metric's not massive, but in the utilities context, this is huge. We were having to make sure we could migrate 15 terabytes of data in a single cutover event, which to us in this particular use case was a weekend. So we've never done that before, just to put that in context. And I've got people here today, when I suggested a single cutover approach, that let's just say it took some conversations and a few times to convince ourselves that was the right thing to do. So I've spoken about our target architecture looking at Oracle RDS, but of course, it's all very well having a nice new place to go to. How do you get your data there? How do you move your business without minimal disruption? As I mentioned, some of the key drivers behind our migration approach, and I'll talk about a bit of a tooling which Parav will then take you through later in a bit deeper detail. But we went to move our business in one hit. We knew we had a window of about, I don't know, just over a day, about 28 hours to do this in. And we needed to have data and functional continuity. Again, factors that many of us in this room deal with day in, day out. But they're not simple, are they? They are things that are real, and when you've got a live business you're deploying into, you need to make sure it works and you get it right. I mentioned the 15 terabytes of storage. That's one thing. We had 9 billion rows of customer data that we have an obligation to keep not just maintained, but accurate, and be able to deal with that from a data compliance perspective in a very specific way in the UK market. And so we couldn't get that wrong either. So with the use of DMS, data migration services, as our key migration enabler, we were able to practice, I can't remember how many times now, at least 7, 8, 9 times, practice this cutover, practice this migration multiple times before we even thought about going live. And from a stakeholder perspective, that built confidence like we couldn't do before in an on-premises situation. So the tooling we had in place here were, we used schema conversion tool, we've used DMS for sure, and there were a few proprietary things we had to do because of the Oracle nature as well around the edges of that. And I think it's fair to say myself, my team, the implementation team, and indeed I'm sure if you speak to the AWS product teams, we all learned a few intricacies about DMS and how it behaved. And thankfully, with those practice runs I mentioned, those dress rehearsals, it worked really well for us. Okay, again, there's loads of outcomes we achieved on this, but what I will say, the headline news is we set out to move our business over in one weekend, and we did it. It's one of an IT project that, in my experience of about 20 years, we didn't change scope. We were able to deploy a tool set and a target architecture which we stuck to. And for EDF UK, that was well received, shall we say, and I'm sure people that have been involved in these sorts of migrations before will take that to any chance they get, shall we say. So in terms of some of those outcomes I mentioned at the start, it's quite nice to put up on the slide in front of a group of strangers, tick boxes against all those outcomes we said we were going to do. So just on the technical aspects of it, we're now on a cloud architecture that is ready for our business to scale, and it's already scaling. We're able to see our costs transparently and make decisions across the whole stack. Does it scale and perform? It genuinely does. And we hear in the sessions like this about the services and what they can do. But when you put them together and you get a collection of different services, you need to make sure that still works. And here for us, it definitely did work. The RDS side of things, having the ability to offload the worry of the maintenance, the patching, the keeping up to date with versions, the technical know-how of how to run databases well, it's a big, big win for us. And we're able to invest our capital, our people's time on the value add stuff for our customers now. And so whilst we haven't gone completely native, we have found that sweet spot for us, which says, let's get the benefit we can from the platform services and make the most of what our people are specialists in, which is providing energy services to the UK. And as we look forward now, we're in a place where we're building on top of that architecture. We're bringing up new value streams into the UK business. And we are working through how to optimize both from a tech perspective and a cost perspective. And very recently, in the last month, because of the workloads we're able to now profile and model, we've made purchasing decisions with Amazon around how to get the most cost efficiency out of that RDS service as well. So not a finished story, but one where migration happened almost seamlessly, he says, maybe a bit arrogantly, but it was very seamless. And why was that? it's not about the technology. It helps a lot. But if you've got strong leadership within your executive, within your business, and you've got a partner ecosystem that we were very specific about in this particular use case, obviously with Amazon there, I'll come on to that in a minute, but our implementation partners in TCS, our Oracle migration specialist in Navisite, and then our on-premise expertise that we had already with our existing partners, that mix was the single most success factor I suggest in our story. Put on top of that, our account management from AWS, the use of the IAM service, so that infrastructure event management capability. I came to a session like this, before COVID and then during COVID virtually, and heard about IAM, and you wonder what that really means. What I can tell you it meant for us was exemplary support throughout the whole, not just the cutover, but ahead of that. And it's just given us the confidence to go after the next one, and now we're pushing on for our next set of modernisation programmes. So hopefully that gives you a bit of colour. I'll hand over to Parath now to talk about the technological elements to what I've touched upon. And any questions after, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you, Mark. And yeah, you brought up a really good point. Support team and the folks, the partners who all worked. So a huge round of applause for everyone. EDF team and Mark and team. That's amazing. So you've migrated to AWS now, and as you said, you're looking into innovation, you're looking into right-sizing and doing your upscaling and downscaling. You also, what I heard is you're doing a monthly, burst up and then burst down for your monthly reports and all. Which is
that modelling is something that's informed the purchasing choices we made. And as you look at your slide here, we're right in that middle sweet spot, I'd suggest, right now.
Yeah. So yeah, and the only way is up, right, for your innovations and then for your costs to go down. So that's the best way we can progress forward. So how do you guys achieve it? So how can we make this happen? So there are multiple streams, multiple pathways for migration and modernization of your databases, and I would say of the workloads, because what Mark and team were dealing with in Future IT was the application tier and then the storage tier with the databases at the bottom. You want to modernize your database, and with that, you want to modernize your applications as well. So the pathways, as you see over here, you could look into a straightforward, very fast, easy rehosting. You could look into replatforming aspects as well, and you could look into refactoring, which is replacing your license and breaking free from the commercial databases. That's what the DB Freedom program is. I'll speak a little bit more about the DB Freedom program going forward. But then, why would you want to do this modernizing, do more of moving over migration to AWS? So you want to move to a fully managed database. With replatforming, Mark and team achieved all of the, let's say, letting AWS take care of the responsibilities of managing the infrastructure. There is no hardware to maintain, OS, patching, HADR, all of that is taken care by the AWS aspects. You just do the configuration. That's the shared responsibility model. And then you can build purpose-build modern applications. You can grow. You can do your additional reporting and such from it, and break free from the legacy databases, the shackles of the legacy databases. We have an open policy, so it works out pretty well. What would you be looking for by doing this? 4 of the major points, which Mark can also line up pretty well here. You modernize your infrastructure. You're looking into a highly reduced CapEx. You're almost using a pay-as-you-go model. With serverless, you could also be reducing your costs drastically. You're looking at automated heavy lifting aspects. So to build the Aurora instances or to deploy the application in a non-production environment, you can just have your CloudFormation scripts and just do the automated deployment. And hopefully it should be a single-click operation. And then you're embracing the purpose-built tools for the purpose-built databases. You're not maintaining your let's say, the back-end stored procedures or the code which takes care of the sequencing or the time series and the ledger aspects of your database. It's all taken care of on the AWS infrastructure. And one of the biggest hurdles, what we would be looking at, is the responsibility on the shared responsibility side Mark and team considered EC2, the middle column here, but RDS was the biggest benefit. And this is where
Absolutely.
you
I
get-
mean, that EC2 option was very real for us. We did a couple of proof of concepts with the AWS team in the States at the time. With our workloads, we were able to mimic out both an RDS view and an EC2 view. And I think if we followed our traditional thinking in EDF, that EC2 piece was comfortable for us. We kind of knew it. We have on-premises DBAs and all those skill sets. But when you look at that shared responsibility and what, frankly, I could offset to Power Apps to deal with, that's where the prize was for us. And but when we did that proof of concept of RDS, it became an absolute no-brainer for us. So
Yeah.
we were able to take that opportunity.
And this helps the customer teams, in case Mark's EDF teams, to just work on that application optimization of the data. You could do the innovation when you're focusing on a small piece there. The rest of the pieces of infrastructure are taken care and are controlled within the AWS infrastructure automatically. So that way it helps everyone. And then to be able to do or to get to there, you want to modernize your data infrastructure, get it in that scalable, trusted environment. You want to, you will have a few checkboxes or let's say an initial assessment and exercise to do. So these are the four major, let's say, boxes you would want to tick. Mark and team also managed to tick all of these boxes and fully, if I say. But yeah, what you would ideally like to do is initially is choosing the right database, saving time and cost, not for migration. This is where I will show some of the tools and some of the programs which we have, but also saving time and cost on the management aspect, on the infrastructure, on the administrative aspects. And use case driven, highly scalable, you don't want to get in, build a future architecture or allocative database and then be stuck with the limitations of it. You want to keep it highly scalable. And this is what the open philosophy of AWS is. Once you have done your modernization, you don't have to stay with it. You can, it's a two-way door, so you can always think about trying to move to alternate techniques or alternate hosting providers and such. Purpose-built databases are the way to go. That's the ultimate dream. You want your application to work with all of the purpose-built databases. Hopefully you have been through Akansha's session on purpose-built databases in Theater 2, but if not, scan the QR code. Please get your cameras out. These are, my slides have got a few QR codes in there, so if you would like to know more information, feel free to scan the QR code, and we tested it from right back of the stages as well, and they are scannable, so they will work. And you can go to these links and you can get to know more. So this is the final, let's say, ideal target set of databases. You would want your core data, your data to stay in the lake, and then you would want to use your ledger databases, your time series databases, key value, and such for the appropriate purposes of the application. So, ideally, you want to get there maybe in a single phase. If you're developing new application, startups are already using purpose-built databases from day one, but commercial organizations or larger enterprises could move in here in multiple phases. So when we talk about enterprise scale migration now, when we talk about large scale migrations, which me and my team normally deals with, we have various aspects or various proportions in which the companies are. So this is the statistics of what we are seeing these days. Rehost, as you see, is still the biggest of the chunk. So you would have come across the 6 R's of AWS. We are looking at rehost, which is the easiest. Well, actually, retire is the easiest. You want to just shut down your service. Sometimes. But if you want to migrate to AWS, rehost will be your easiest option. And that is a bigger chunk, which we are observing right now. Replatform is the next biggest, and then comes refactor. So replatform is moving your commercial databases from on-premise to AWS on RDS, Oracle, or SQL as such. And refactoring would be to modernize your RDBMS if it is an RDBMS, it needs to be kept as an RDBMS. You are moving your RDBMS databases to open source like Postgres and MySQL, hosting it on Aurora, making it highly available, HADR, and the performance aspects are taken care of. But this is where we would really be keen on the refactor. We would all like to do refactoring. Refactoring also gets rid of the commercial databases. And in Mark's situation, you did a replatform.
We did, and that's the use case I've spoken to you about. Obviously, we work in an enterprise environment, and we've got a whole modernization program, as I mentioned. And these percentages, I'd say, yeah, they resonate, I think. As you say, we try and look as far right as possible, not to retire everything, just to be clear, but you know, in those green spots there. But the reality is there's all sorts of different drivers, whether they be business drivers, CapEx drivers, just what's sensible to do. But like I say, we did a replatform in my particular use case. We also have quite a bit of rehosting going on for sure, but nicely we've got some refactoring going on as well. So a whole spread, and I think this diagram is pretty representative of any larger organization at this point in time, I'd say.
Yeah. So picking the top three, as we spoke earlier, lift and shift, which is the rehost, migrate. We've got the databases which can run exactly in the same manner as you had on-premise, but you're running it on AWS, gaining a little bit. Your value is a small amount of value, quickest time in which you can do the migration. You gain more by doing replatforming, which Mark and team did. So you're getting more value, and it takes a little bit longer of a time. But modernizing or refactoring is which takes the most amount of time and most amount of value and most amount of efforts. You probably need most amount of skills in your team, and you would want to use migration experts for refactoring purposes in a targeted manner as well. But this is where our DB Freedom programs and other programs come in. Various incentives, various fundings available for partners. So we understand the problem. We know the pain point of what refactoring brings in, and we are bringing in solutions and tools and programs for that purposes. So we'll dive a little bit into there. But not all customers are in the same sort of situation at point in time, right? So as Mark mentioned, you've done replatforming for one of your program, one of your utilities, one of your applications, workloads. You probably have few workloads on-premise. You probably have a few workloads already on AWS. So there could be various stages of your migration journey. And AWS tools and programs and teams can help out at each of the stage. So we can jump in from the beginning, since when you would want to draw out that initial strategy, you would want to look into the benefits. We would be able to explain to members at all the levels of your organization of what the benefits of modernizing, migrating would be. If you are already in the process of migration, and if you are hitting bottlenecks, we have our SAs, our ProServe team, and some of the partners who can jump in, who can help out on speeding up the process if it is slow, or giving the answers for some of the questions which you may not know the answer for. So at all the levels. And then if you are on AWS, if you have a, let's say, a Oracle or SQL Server commercial database running on RDS, we can help on looking at the benefits of purpose-built, how to do the modernizing, how to move over to purpose-built databases as well. So at all the stages, our teams and programs are available for you all to make use of. And what are these? Here are 6 of the biggest of the let's say programs, I can call it, are available. DB Freedom is the most common. It's purely about commercial to open source for databases. So when it's commercial to open source for databases, we don't really, or the program didn't initially look into application. And we found a huge amount of customers facing problems, taking much longer time to do the refactoring, to do the recoding of the application, to make it all work, make it all function in a good way. And that's when we introduce DMA. DMA is an offering we introduced over a year ago. And this is where we are providing a very absolute way of doing your entire application or workload conversion. So that's the database and the application all together. I'll explain a little bit about DMA in the next few slides. And then for support, you have the professional services, you have your migration partners and the tools, and then we have the fundings for co-location, divestiture programs and such as well. Now talking about the tools, so the tools are on an ongoing, constant development process. So we always keep our ears open. We always want to hear about the customer problems you have, and we want to try and solve these problems as frequently and as well as we can. One of the biggest pain points, one of the biggest problems which we found was, okay, how do we do this conversion? Are there any tools available for that? SCT is available, and DMS. DMS is for low downtime, easy transition. We are looking at these tools, and Mike Revit, who was sitting here, has just gone out. It's his next session at 3:30 in Theatre 8. Mike will dive deep into these tools. He will give you a demo as well. So there's a live demo, which Mike can explain further on. And this is probably one of the biggest areas or biggest requirements in terms of tools which we have had so far.
And just to share a bit of experience with both of these, that's definitely proved to be the case with us. And what I didn't hone in on in my earlier piece was, as well as making that migration, we were actually taking two very large database schemas and consolidating them into one. So not only were we migrating the data, we were consolidating. They were very similar in terms of their end look, but the schema conversion tool helped with us building our own confidence about how that mapping and how that was going to work. And then, as you'll hear in a minute, DMS, we learned some stuff for sure, but it was an absolute game changer for us in terms of how we were able to have choice about how we cut over and how that impacted or not, in our case, our customers.
That's great. So these tools are available, and then we keep on learning. So when I talk about the learning aspect, the latest release is our DMS Fleet Advisor. So you don't want to just look at one database. If you're looking at large organizations, enterprise levels situation, you want to look at tens and hundreds of databases, which you would want that advisory service or the mapping service available. So here's the new tool, DMS Fleet Advisor. We have released in the last few months. And what it does, as it says, it gives you an advice for the entire fleet. It will generate a list of all of the potential migration targets, and it will give you results in hours instead of weeks of the manual analysis you may be doing. And SCT or DMS, the tools which we have launched, we don't just keep them in the original launch state. We have obviously upgrading and adding on more and more features to the tools. And one of the latest one is for SCT multi-server server assessor as well. So multi-server assessor from a reporting perspective. So if you consider the three phases of your migration, you want to do your assessment, you want to do your mobilizing or building of the target infrastructure, and then you want to do the migration. Assessment to measure what are the low-hanging fruits, to measure what are the easier databases to migrate, workloads to migrate, and to then assess which targets to migrate to and why. You would want those data points. You would want to know what is that percentage of object codes for conversion and all. And this is exactly what the multi-server assessor will provide. It will give you the exact percentage of what number of objects can be converted, and the ones which cannot be converted, it will give you a detailed report of the reasons why it cannot be converted or what are the workarounds to it. With the management team, probably you would want that decision to be made at the top level, and there you just need simple, let's say, level of effort calculations and rankings. So this is where the last column comes in, complexity, conversion complexity grading from 1 to 10. So there are internal mechanisms which SCT multi-server assessor uses and does this grading, and then you can then know exactly where your workloads or which databases fall on which complexity grade, and then you can pick and choose how you would want to do the migration and modernization of. This helps a lot in large enterprise situations where you may want to decide between the re-platforming and refactoring. That barrier, it could be depending on time, depending on the budgets available, the choices could be varying. So we leave the choices to you. We just provide the grading which can help you make those choices in the right way. So I spoke about DMA. DMA is an internal service team which we have developed and built. So what we learned from experiences so far, experiences of refactoring, we found out the refactoring, using of the tools, using of DMS, using of SCT, takes a lot of efforts and learning. And it takes much longer time, budget, and it needs the skills, as I mentioned. So we took it all in-house, and we have now got a fixed price offering, which does takes the workload from your on-premise environment. So that's the whole application and the whole database all together. Once the workload is qualified, you then hand it over to the SCT team. There are conversion experts, AWS conversion experts sitting in that team who are using the same tools, who will use some additional engineering and manual efforts. So SCT, if you've seen the reports, it'll say so much percentage can be done automatically, certain percentage can be done manually. But that manual effort is all handed over to the DMA team. And it's a fixed price offering, which we have got. So as we've only got the 3 categories, 1, 2, and 3. And depending on which categories your workload fall under, there's a fixed price to it. Fixed price and fixed duration. Duration of only up to 7 to 9 weeks when we're just getting that entire workload converted, and we hand it back in your non-production environment. You can test it thoroughly, and there's only one milestone. Either the workload is completely converted to your satisfaction, or it's not, and you pay nothing for it. So that's the guarantee which the DMA offering provides. It's a service organization. We have got a large team sitting in Poland who are working away on this, building amazing engineering processes. And hopefully we will propagate the lessons learned by that team into the tools eventually. So the benefit is going to be added on to SCT and DMS Fleet.
What you're saying is I was 2 years too early.
Well, there's always time for more progression, right? You can look into purpose build.
That percentage that you still need to analyse, if that can be provided as a service, I think as a client, as a customer, that's going to be an interesting offering in the future for us.
Yeah. And then we are looking at DMA, which is, okay, one workload. We are looking at SCT, which is just single individual databases. Fine, we've got multi-server assessor, but that's the assessment stage. How do you make that whole decision tree, and how do you then do this migration and modernization in bulk? So we have got large-scale migration processes and large-scale migration programs. We have got partner teams who are specially trained for large-scale migrations. And we've got internal professional services organizations. My team, my department, we work away on specially forming that decision trees. We create the procedures and the internal documentation. So your documentation could be in Confluence or such. We create your documentation purpose-built for your organization, your requirements, adhering to all of the processes and procedures and rules and regulations which individual customers may have as well. And then that is then all built in-house. So then you can keep it permanently. You know why was the decision taken for a specific workload to be replatformed or to be refactored. So that way you can always go back. That way you're getting that enterprise level support from AWS and our partners. And then, yeah, once the program begins, or you can have certain percentages of workloads to be converted and migrated in year 1. You can have a year 2 program and such. You can just do all of the work on a gradual basis. And eventually, we get to the ultimate modern data strategy on AWS. And that is where we would ideally like everybody to get to. We would like the modernizing aspect. Once the data is on AWS, if you have done your replatforming, which Mark and team have done, you would want to look into purpose-built. if you have done, if you've got your data dispersed away, you would want to look at storing that data in a data lake in between and then try and use purpose-built around it, so unifying your data, and then innovate, which Mark and team is looking very well for as well.
Just about to really kick on with that, yeah.
Yep. So here's the full journey. Hopefully you are now well educated on the tools, and more deep diving on the tools in Theatre 8 at 3:30 after. And feel free to ask us any questions if you've got any concerns. To learn the skills and all of the tools which I had mentioned, you can go on to the AWS Skills Builder portal. There we have got labs, we've got sessions which can train you for using the tools and purposes, and certification is the right way to go. Wear the socks which I've got. These are the certification socks. You can get some free socks after. And that's the end of the session. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.